This is the Juki 1541. I'm going to talk about how to thread this machine, how to load the bobbin, how to adjust the bobbin loader, and how to load a bobbin into the machine. I'll even go over how to oil the machine. So if you just got one of these machines, hopefully this video will help you get it set up and ready to go. So I recommend you get one of these oiling bottles with the flexible tube. Right here is an oil well that has a large felt pad in it that soaks up oil, and there are many wicks that all come together within this well. The oil that you put in here will wick out throughout the rest of the machine. So you can kind of see that felt pad in there. And as I put oil in, that pad just kind of soaks it up. And then the wicks that are in there will also soak it up. So I just look in there, and as long as that pad is just looks wet with oil, then I think that's enough. So you want to download the manual for this machine. There's only 2 steps to oiling this machine. Here they give some arrows where to find oiling points. It also indicates the felt pad in the top. For first time setup, it recommends taking off the top cover and oiling all the wicks and pads underneath this cover. So anytime a machine has been sitting around for a real long time, or you just get it for the first time, you should pull this cover. So that's what we'll do now. So just 6 screws. This is the window that you can see while the cover is on. You can see there's a pad here. We'll just soak it in. Might as well give this wick a little. Here's a wick. Just go ahead and touch the wicks up. Here's a felt pad down here. There's a felt pad. You want enough, but not too much. Like the manual says, if you get too much, you'll get leakage. So you can see some more felt pads and wicks in here. These are mainly the areas that you're going to want to lubricate. Again, check that manual. There's a link in the description. Anytime I get a used sewing machine for the first time, I'll go and soak up all these wicks. I guess I'm usually guilty of putting on a little too much oil. The problem is that oil will come out down here and get on your projects. Typically, I'll just use scrap material when I'm getting my tension set and getting my machine all set up to use. I'll wipe everything down real good, and any oil gets on that scrap material. And then after I've done all that, I'm usually good to go for the rest of the day. So here on the bottom of the machine, there's an oil reservoir, and this automatically lubricates the hook. This reservoir has a clear panel and a high and low line. So you can see the top line is marked high and the bottom line is marked low. So you want your oil to be somewhere in between those 2 lines. You don't want it to be over the high, and you don't want it to be under the low. You look at that measurement when your machine is tipped back onto the kickstand. You just use regular sewing machine oil. Sometimes it's called Lily White. Juki's got their own version of it, D-Frix something or another. I don't know. I buy locally by the gallon, but you can get it on Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, so whenever I start on a project, I like to have 2 spools of thread, and whenever I buy thread, I always buy at least 2 spools, and that way I can use 1 spool to thread a bobbin and the other spool can thread the machine, and I can work on my project while the bobbin is loading. So now let's take one of our spools and load a bobbin. We're going to go from the thread tree down to this post. So I like to come in from the back, and then I go to the second hole and I also enter from the back. So you kind of get a wrap around the pole like that. Then we come to the thread tensioner. This thread tensioner is here just for the bobbin winder. So here's a small tip. If I have work in the machine, I don't really want to stop and pay attention to this and get it started. So what I do is I just put one of these little clips on there. That little bit of weight is all it takes to get the bobbin started. And then when I get to a place in my work and I've got a few rounds on here, I'll just clip that part of the thread off. So I've loaded this bobbin and it automatically kicked off when it was this full. Now I've previously adjusted this bobbin winder to kick off at just this point. If your bobbin is not getting full enough or it is getting too full, you can loosen this black screw here. So here's an empty bobbin. When you engage the bobbin winder, this finger moves down into the bobbin. As the bobbin fills, it slowly pushes up against that finger that's inside the bobbin here, and eventually it moves it up enough to where there's a cam that disconnects. So by loosening this screw, moving this finger either down or up, you can adjust how full this bobbin will get. So when you adjust this finger down, the bobbin will get less full before it kicks off automatically. Conversely, if you move this finger up, the bobbin will get more full before it kicks off. So I've loosened this screw. Now this finger can move in and out. So if I move it down, the winder will disconnect sooner and the bobbin will have less thread on it. If I move it up, the winder will disconnect later and the bobbin will get more thread on it. So you kind of have to find the Goldilocks position. There's a little bit of trial and error involved here, but eventually you'll get it to where it's just right. Okay, so loading a bobbin is pretty much like any sewing machine. So when you look at the case, this is the bobbin and this is the bobbin case. There's a line here. That's the line that we're going to pull the thread through. Then there is a spring here and we're going to sneak it up under the spring into this hole. So looking at the case like this, we're going to hold the bobbin to where the thread is coming across the top like this. So you could hold it like that. That's not the way we want it. So there's 2 ways to hold it. So this is the way we want it. So you drop it in there, then you bring that thread through this line and then under that spring. Okay, and it's going to pull like that. Now on this spring there's 2 screws. First, here's where the thread comes out. So the very back screw simply holds this spring. It's a leaf spring. The back screw holds the leaf spring on, and this screw is what tightens or loosens the tension on the spring. I just kind of get a feel for it, and you can kind of play around with it. It usually doesn't take much, and some people kind of do this test where you suspend it, and then if you can kind of jiggle it, it will kind of deploy some. That might help in the beginning. It's a little bit of a fiddly test, but you can try it, and then once you kind of get a feel for it, you can start to test it by hand. You don't need much tension really. That's something you'll just have to get the hang of. So just leave a tail on there, 6 or 8 inches. That way when you put it in the machine, you can pull that up with the needle. Now I've got the machine tilted back so that we can get a better look. Now if you want to tip it back to change out the bobbin and bobbin case, you sure can. And maybe the first couple of times you want to do that so that you can look right at it. There's a pin in the center of the hook that goes through this hole, this part of the case where you can see the thread. So you can't see thread anywhere else but right at the top. That goes to the top of the machine. So put the pin in the hole and keep this to the top of the machine. It kind of clocks in. You can rock it back and forth and feel exactly where it needs to be. And then you'll need to push it until this outside finger clicks in. If you just push on it, you can hear it click. Once you get to using it and you do it just a couple times, you get to where it's pretty easy. You can move back this access panel and you can look down through there, and then you can see what you're doing. Pull that out. So there's your bobbin. Once you install your bobbin and you pull that out, of course that's going to hold it in, and then just look down through here as you put it back in. Let's thread the machine. So to get started, we'll go from the thread tree to this thread guide. So this thread guide's got 4 holes. Typically you only use 2 of them. You could use all 4 if you wanted to impart slightly more tension to the thread path, but generally speaking, all your thread tension adjustments can be done with the thread tensioner. So from this thread guide to this one. It's important you get the thread to click up around the point of this horn. Once you come under there and you get into that spring, you want to pull it up until you hear the thread click over the point of that horn. Now when the machine sews, this take-up spring operates like this. So you can just see the top of the take-up spring. So from here, I'm going to go through this lower guide and then through this second guide, through the take-up lever, and back down through this guide. So 1, 2, 3, 4. These threaders are super handy. Check the description for a link. Okay, so we've got our machine threaded, bobbin and bobbin case installed. Last thing we need to do before we sew is pull that bobbin tail up through the feed dog. So you kind of hold on to this. You don't want to pull real tight on it. You're just holding on to it so that the hook doesn't pull it completely below the table. So just rotate the machine through. You watch that needle, and that needle's going to come up. Let it come all the way up to the top. Once it's to the top, that thread will pull back up. It won't pull back up before that. And if everything worked right, it will have caught that tail. You can pull that out. One thing a little different about these industrial machines is when you start sewing, you need to hold on to these tails. Otherwise, they're just going to get pulled down into the hook and cause a big mess for you. So you need to hold on to those tails every time you start. You need at least a couple of stitches in before you let go. So that's going to look like this. Thanks a lot for watching my video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd like to further support me, find my Patreon link. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a video.